On this episode, we welcome in founder of Wealth Elevator, Lane Kawaoka. And having benefited so much from community over the years on his growth journey, Lane challenges us to consider who we surround ourselves with, because we need people that will ready us to first consider and then support what's possible. I'm really excited about some of the unique qualities of Lane's story, which we're going to get into as we go through the conversation. But Lane, I'm not going to let you get out of here without answering the question that I have everybody ask as we get started today. What would it mean to you to be growth?
I guess something I've been catching myself on lately is always to go into meetings or interactions with a curious mindset. Sometimes I can get into thinking I already got the answer, or that won't work, this won't work, or we've already tried that, especially in the world of marketing. You try different things, but if you always catch yourself, and or at least I've been trying to do, is have a curious attitude on things, everything.
I like the term catch yourself. It's a heightened level of awareness is what I'm hearing straight away, just to be more deliberate in that curiosity. So tell me how you maybe came to this awareness. Where did this need to lead with curiosity, if you will, originate from?
I have a coach, and he called me out one day. He's like, dude, you just keep shooting my ideas down. I'm like, oh, yeah, touche, I got it.
It's a good coach.
But yeah, I think that's why you got coaches, right? Most times we're just telling ourselves BS, or working on the wrong things, or working on things that make us feel good instead of what actually moves the needle forward. That's why I have an executive coach and have a couple of business advisor groups of peers. But yeah, the peers aren't going to really keep you accountable like a coach will, for sure.
I would love for you just to maybe even share with our listeners, for anyone who's maybe not used to having coaching, not used to being part of peer groups and things like that, what is it in your journey when you just think about the course of it so far? Where was it that you felt that the importance of welcoming this challenge, welcoming these other voices, welcoming this heightened sense of accountability, if you will? Because it sounds as though you're definitely going out, finding it and bringing it towards you, as opposed to maybe waiting for that sort of thing to show itself in a more organic way.
I think that's how I use it today. But initially, I use these types of organizations and groups more as to give me confidence, coming at from the opposite way. I think a lot of, I guess I would say, smart people are usually a little too humble, right? And maybe I put myself in that camp. And to know that, hey, I fit in this group of high-performing executives or these other people with the same amount of ability and similar business sizes, some bigger, some smaller, are doing these next level things. And why can't I do that? And at the end of the day, you are the 5 people you hang out with most.
Did it get to a point where it hurt you, or was humility just something that initially brought you, let's say, to the door of some of these opportunities of going into some of these experiences?
I look back at when we started the firm prior to 2018, I was coming at it and trying everything. The saying is you always say yes to everything. Somebody sends you some type of conference here. Yeah, why not? Let's go. You got to meet people, especially in our industry. At some point, you become a little bit more selective, maybe a little bit too selective. And when you think of what you got you here, at least for us in the real estate investment world, it's about meeting the right people. Yeah, and you got to obviously select the right events. Typically, the more expensive ones with the higher caliber people are the ones to go with. But it is kissing a lot of frogs at the end of the day. This is where the magic happens. And sometimes I catch myself, maybe wasn't inclined to do that because I was being more selective. That's not really got us to this point.
It's one of my favorite insights. Is context is so important when we say what got us here won't get us there, for instance. And that's very much what you're alluding to right now, because on the flip side of that, there's some people that give up on things that work really well for them and ignore things that have worked well for them. And if only they'd stop to realize that what got them here may in fact continue to get them there. So just contextually, I think for anybody listening, because it is one of those terms that sometimes just get thrown out. You see it on like an Instagram post or a graphic. It just says, hey, remember, what got you here won't get you there. Contextually, I think, what would you think is important for someone to consider when there is this need to potentially change? Because that's what you're alluding to here is, hey, whatever got me to where it was I was at wasn't necessarily going to get me to where I felt I was capable of getting. Like, what are some of those signs you would say, at least from your own experience, where you felt the need for change, the need for challenge was necessary at that certain juncture of your life?
What got us here isn't going to get us to where we want to be. For us, like we used to invest in a lot of real estate, and we still will. We would upgrade 50, 100 unit apartment complex initially, and then stepped up to bigger assets and started to develop. But right now, from 2022 to 2025, you got high interest rates, and that's not going to be coming around decreasing under 3%, the Fed rate I'm talking about, in the next decade.
Sure.
So it's a changing of the guard, essentially. And so over the last couple of years, we've been looking to buy businesses, get into different avenues where interest rates aren't really a huge impact to us in a bad interest rate environment. So that's an example of externally, we need to look at different things. Now, internally, I think what got us here is connecting with the right people, using our network to vet other people to bring into our circle to find better deal flow. That's how we find a lot of deal flow is people say, you guys are a little bit all over the place. The common thread is the people, right? So what got us here was connecting and building real relationships with other general partners, business operators, and navigating the world that way in this disconnected world and creating our own community of investors. I think one thing that's been said by some of my closest people is we do a really good job, or at least I do a really good job of filtering in the right people. I have one-on-one conversations with every single person that joins my community to all the little passive investor. The reason why I do that is obviously if we work together, we're going to be stuck with each other for a long time. But also what I use as a barometer is, do I want this person to come out to Hawaii to one of our retreats and interact and possibly be a negative experience that somebody else does? I don't want that to happen. So that's where, I think that's what got us here. And that is you leverage your skill sets and you keep doing that internally, but externally, like I said, you got to keep doing different things.
The internal versus the external. I'd love for you just to give us this minute or two, just explanation of what is the business that you're operating today? What are the focus areas of the business today?
Yeah, so we work with high net worth investors and small business owners to get a part of their portfolio in alternative investments. And then originally, when we first started, those alternative investments would be real estate investments, because that was how I grew my portfolio. 2009, I bought my first rental property, bought a few more in Seattle, Washington. Then by 2015, I had 11. And at that point, I started to buy apartments. And then that was when the number count exploded from there. So that's what I realized is when you buy real estate, you get a lot of great tax benefits. And the suite of strategies that I found that a lot of accredited investors is pretty commonplace. And my parents weren't super wealthy. I didn't have a rich uncle. I didn't know any accredited investors when I was growing up in my 20s, building my portfolio. And I realized that not a lot of people had the same experiences or the ability to connect with other people like I did. So a lot of people are still maybe 10, 20 years behind myself. So we teach people the strategies of the wealthy. And I wrote a lot of this in my book, The Wealth Elevator, of the different floors of the wealth elevator. You go through different stages of investing, mostly tied to where your net worth is, right? There's something that you do that's when you're under $1 million, $2 million net worth. There's something that you do from 2 to 5 million net worth. And then beyond, right? I've gotten exposure myself to a lot of what do you do when you start to become more of a family office? Your job is not trading time for money in your business or working a job, but your job is just investing the funds that you do have for long term.
Yeah. It's even more fascinating when you just think about the time that you've done this during, I'm curious, what was it about your own skill set, as you alluded to there, like that internal part of this, that you really do have the control? What do you feel it was about your internal skill sets that allowed you to navigate so much change when you think about just the sheer volatility of these worlds that you've been operating in the last 10 years?
I think maybe I got lucky too, right? I started to connect with the right people and we started to do deals together. Some people obviously didn't work out, but you find the good people out there and you stick with each other and you work together. And then you step up from doing smaller deals to much bigger deals. It's not too much harder. I think that was one of the places where you need a little bit of luck to get going in anything, especially to start a business. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is at the end of the day, the system. You find good alternative investments off of Wall Street or what they want you to invest in, the big institutions, and you get directly to the source and you do it with good people. And you just rinse, wash, repeat. And along comes a lot of good tax benefits that the wealthy employ all the time. And, it's just a way that I realize that large family offices will do all day, every day. But it's very different than what we're all taught working the day job or what people talk in the cubicle land. And that's the frustrating thing. For the average guy, it's not inaccessible what to do. It's just very counterintuitive that people don't do it because that's not what our parents taught us to invest in.
Now we end up all the way back at one of those earlier points in the conversation of this. Sounds as though it's a natural tendency for you to at least go and acquire what otherwise may go against what you have initially been taught or what you've initially been exposed to, whether it be through family, through education, whatever it is. It's almost as though I'm hearing that you have this sort of set of antennae that are just up at all times. What else is out there? What else do I not know? And it comes back almost to that initial insight around curiosity too, is that for you to always have one eye on what's going on externally, for you to have one eye on ways that we can become educated in ways that we otherwise aren't educated. Curious, like how much, when you made that conscious shift recently towards curiosity, how much were you able to go back and look maybe over the years that there was some evidence maybe that you were in fact a curious being all along?
When I was back in 2009, not a lot of people buy little rental properties right after buying their first house to live in. So obviously a little bit different than the average bear at that point. And then a couple of years later, buying a duplex. Who does that in their 20s? So I already knew I was a little bit different than the average person out there. But I think this is where engineers are very common in this investment world, because we look at the numbers and we're like, this works. I pick up a property for $1,000 a month that rents, my debt service is $500. This works, right? The numbers make sense. In a way, a little bit autistic to the fears and the risks, right? That, are there. But I think that's where some people who are a little bit more creative or wide open minded wouldn't move forward, because they would see the risks and the issues more so than the big thing, which is this thing brings in $1,000 a month rent. The expenses are $800. Almost worst case scenario. Sure, things could happen, but that's every month, a couple $100 in that single family home example.
Yeah. And you've alluded to it there, this background that you had in engineering. And now that you start to piece this together for me a little bit more, it does start to make a bit more sense in the fact that when we have math, and it's some of the most, if we allow ourselves to look at the math with simplicity as opposed to create complications with looking at more risks and more other external influences, that maybe the math and math alone can actually help us see that, oh, this is a smart decision. This is what we should be doing. But something I definitely wanted to get to here was this transition of yours to go from this world of engineering to move full-time into the business that you have today. You talk about transition as much as we should on a podcast that is themed around growth. And growth, if growth's anything, it's inconsistent, it's different, it's ever changing. And so transition, I feel like, is very ever present in the growth journey. So what was it about that transition that, I guess, talk to us a little bit about that choice behind the transition and maybe why you were able to do it successfully?
Yeah, so I guess this is going to resonate with people working a side gig as their main job. At least that's how I feel everybody should do it, because that was my experience. But the engineering job is very stable. You're not going to get very wealthy by doing that, but it is very stable. And if you can get to a point where you don't really have to work too much at your day job, you can start to peel off other time, energy to doing your side gig, which for me was buying a little rental property on the side. I use professional property management because that's what they're there for. You have to pay them 10% of the rents, but that allowed me to focus on my highest and best use, which was being a junk engineer. Was okay. And that allowed me to get a paycheck, which I was pretty good at saving. That was my big thing. Personal finance 101. I was pretty good at that type of stuff.
Sure.
As I kept moving along, again, I think 2015 was a big inflection point when I had 11 rental properties and started to realize that there was a level beyond that, buying apartments. But there was a period there of a few years where I was working an engineering job and with these big apartments and with customers and investors, and had to juggle all of that. Literally had the Apple MacBook and 3-finger swipe left. I actually forget how to do it because I don't have two lives anymore.
Right.
Just everything is my business now on my computer. That was where, there was a while there that I had double life going on. And sure, there was a point where you had to burn the boats. But for me, it was a pretty natural progression on how I did it. You could take the leap of faith, but I'm very against that. I'm like, just make sure you have proof of concept in your business first, that you're able to at least pay for the minimal living expenses, whether that's a few grand a month. And then, because if you're bringing in money, then you have a viable business plan that's actually working. Yeah. You have what the people in a tech role will say, you have product market fit. Yeah. Without that, it's a huge gamble where this thing will even fly if you're even successful on it.
For me, what I like about what you're saying here is, even if you're not trying to start a business, become an entrepreneur, whatever it is, you're just looking at some form of transition in your life, whatever you're transitioning towards, to have some sort of evidence that this is a move that can have some momentum when you initially arrive at it, as opposed to starting from a complete dead end. Is there any sign of evidence? Is there any sign that traction can occur or momentum can be created early on to at least have some of those basic essentials tailored to when you first start? But I almost like it as a sense of evolution for a human to think, what is my proof of concept for this next chapter that I have coming up in my life? What is that next part of this growth journey that I'm trying to go towards? Because it's really what the other part of our show is about, the readiness. Like it's not just the growth, it's are you ready for the growth too? And so much of what you're alluding to here, Lane, I feel is you did what you needed to on that front end to feel ready to make that initial jump and that initial transition, right?
Yeah. Every business is different. If you're like a real estate agent or mortgage broker, you don't really get as paved path business moving forward. Those guys to me are just salesmen. Like they're just that's not really an entrepreneurial business. Some people get upset with me for saying that, but it's pretty paved road. It's a clean, proven system.
Sure.
Business, people have been coaching people for a while, right? Maybe in your vertical might be different, right? So that's a little bit more of a gray area. What I was doing, syndicating apartment buildings and real estate investments, was something that I didn't really have exposure to out there. I didn't know really anybody who did it, who wasn't second, third generation, who already had a network doing it. But I think where we're going here is you look inward and what is your talent base? What is your competitive advantage? If you were to do like a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But I guess that's the strengths and weaknesses that you have internally. What is it that are good for you, and how does that line up to the path you're moving forward? And maybe this is where a coach or a third party comes in and says, hey, Steve, you're just not good with people. You're an a-hole.
Sure.
That doesn't align with what you need to be a coach.
No, and what I love about this is it allows us to transition back now to what you're doing today. And this community that you speak of in terms of you have folks that even commit as far as coming to meet with you there in person. And I'd have to assume that, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as though the majority of this community is based on maybe folks that were once in your similar position, maybe that don't necessarily have the means that some would typically have entering this world, but they're looking to get started. I'm just curious now, you're now overseeing a community filled with people that are open to this transition the same way that you decided that I wanted to navigate this transition back in the day. What are some of the telltale signs that folks are they've either given it the thought they need to give, or they're maybe not so ready as they typically probably should be when they think about some of these major transitions that it sounds as though this community is a part of?
For me, the idea of starting to do all these events and build the mastermind and essentially build the ecosystem was when I stepped into this world in 2016. I had a bunch of rental properties, but I didn't realize there was this world of accredited investors investing this way, doing taxes in a certain way. And that was my big aha moment. And that was the experience that I wanted to create for other people, this transformation of them doing it. And you weren't able to create it, or at least what I thought initially, and I still do today. The basic ingredients is fill the room, go to a cool place, and with accredited investors that are curated. So that's where the filtering. That's why I talk to pretty much everybody and get their vibe, and we filter the wrong people out. And then once that point, now you just have, that's the magic. It's it, right? Like you already have people all thinking the same way that aren't all about their 401k, aren't getting the company match and all that nonsense and stuff like that. So that was, I think, where it initially started. And I think from there, having that, I guess that's empathy, right? That was where I came from. So it was easy for me to know what somebody needed because that was what I needed myself at one time.
Yeah.
So it's refined over the years for sure, where I think the next thing is like a lot of my clients are very similar to myself for introverts. I'm an introvert. I don't really care to talk to this stuff with regular people. I'm just going to get shut down. They're going to think I'm crazy, right? For investing in 3 rental properties. Now we got thousands, of course. But this is where like I never really liked when I had to go to all these conferences and meet a lot of people. It was a struggle for me. But I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a lion. I'm going to get it done. And if you're listening, you're probably the same way. But for most people out there, they don't really have that push. And that was my job, was to lead everybody else to that point. So I had to create my events to a point where it was a little bit more accessible to the average guy out there who was introverted, maybe a little bit socially awkward, right? And to their point, it's like they're coming to Hawaii, they're meeting a lot of people that they don't know about, and they're higher net worth, so they have something to lose from a privacy, liability standpoint, and they're divulging a lot of personal information, financial information to people they don't know. So what I've realized is I never really like unstructured events or networking. I don't like that stuff. To me, it's a waste of time. It's unstructured. So I try to keep a lot of the events that we do, the happy hour, which is, you always got to do that. But I try to keep everything curated. There's a point to everything. There's a speaking sheet. There's a table topic. Everything, it eventually goes off the rails, but at least there's a start to everything. So there, at least we're not just a bunch of people hanging out in Hawaii. There's purposes, there's guardrails. From this time, you're talking to these people about this. Then we're going to switch it up. We're going to keep it moving, because I get it. I'm not the one kind of person who has the gift of the gab. We just start BSing with people about some topic. No, I need some help.
Yeah.
So that was where empathetically I needed to create something for my people. And it seems like it resonated with a lot of people out there, especially in this day and age where we've gotten a little bit less social. Who knows? Maybe the Gen Zers or alphas out there who are supposedly socially inept by the time they come up. But I don't think I'm be around that long for them to turn 50 and become my investor, to be honest.
Right.
But I think that's more and more people these days, they need a little bit of push in the right direction.
There's so much. Again, we're not a wealth podcast. We're not a real estate podcast. You're explaining the need for there to be a point to everything, for there to be guardrails, for us to have some sort of sign of forward progress being made at all times. And my immediate thought goes to, shoot, no matter where you are on your growth journey, no matter what you're doing and what industry you're doing it in, what does your equivalent community look like of that? Because for me, I hear that you're going above and beyond to ensure that no one feels as though their time is being wasted, and what they're investing in outside of the investment itself, but what they're investing in is a further evolved version of themselves every time they experience this community. And I'm just curious as to, when you think about the effectiveness of your community, not only the one you're providing to other people, but the one that as you've alluded to throughout this, you've created for yourself too. How much of that are we maybe as a society sometimes forgetting? Because we do, like you said, we have all these opportunities to network. We have all these opportunities to go to events, but it sounds as though there's some key components to community that you're a believer in, that you have proof of concept in, that maybe sometimes we're not necessarily respecting in the formation of these communities that we create for ourselves.
What comes to mind is you never go to an uncurated networking event. First of all, everybody's just starting out. They're in it for themselves and they're trying to get to square one. Just a waste of time to me.
Yeah.
Like it's like crabs in a bucket at that point. I think that's what makes my events so tricky, is predominantly everybody's accredited investors. So net worth $1 million or greater, or they make over $250,000 a year. These people are not your go to every single freaking event junkie, like how most entrepreneurs are out there. Yeah. And we all know who the influencers are that put those types of events are. Yeah. And that's where I knew from the start it needed to be very different than a typical conference or event that most of us, the entrepreneurs, will go to. And yeah, I just don't really like wasting time too. Yeah. People come in, they want to learn about taxes and they hear some experiences from other people. They also want to learn about doing due diligence on deals. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is, like, social relationships are the currency of the wealth. At the end of the day, they also want to find 4 or 5 dudes or gals that they want to have their family meet, or the families keep connected over the years, 5, 10. We've been doing this for pretty much a decade now. Yeah. Those relationships have gone off into different places. I think those are the cool things. What I realized this all creates. At the end of the day, you invest and you save money on taxes, you're going to get the financial freedom pretty quickly. It's more about the social relationships. But that's not what these guys come for initially. Yep, so that's the vegetables and diet and exercise long-term type of stuff. Initially, what attracts them is they want to check this world out. They want to make sure that they're thinking from a math basis. Yeah, this all makes sense. Investing in apartments, for example, they don't make any more land. People need a place to live, especially this lower middle class. And it all makes sense, but it needs to be validated by other people who've also had a lived experience doing it too, is so critical.
Yeah. And there's something that you're getting to there around just the need to do one's due diligence on the front end of, say, committing to a community, committing to an event. And then because of that, you then allow yourself to probably be there a little bit more comfortably, authentically, and who knows, maybe you develop these social relationships that come off the back of it through families and whatnot. And I think that's what I'm hearing through this, is what you've been able to achieve and create. But what we can take away as listeners and just say, hey, what does that due diligence need to look like on the front end in the creation of a community, so that when you maybe get into it and you structure it for yourself, you can feel more organic, more authentic once you're in there. And who knows, maybe that leads to parts of your life being opened up but because of that. But one thing I wanted to get to here as well is that you talked about that most folks don't necessarily have the push, if you will, to really get to where it is they're maybe capable of getting to. And I'm just curious, when you think about, obviously, the world that you're operating in, most, if not all, folks seem to have that push in some way, shape, or form. But if you had to capture it maybe in your own life or just through what you've experienced, what would you say gives people that push? What is it that's helped you maybe over the years when you think back of, hey, what was it that gave me the push? Or what is it that I've maybe seen other people do in order to get the push themselves?
I think the big thing is knowing it's possible, right? Like majority of people out there just think that the 60-40 stocks, mutual funds, the stock ratio, getting the 6 to 8% is the status quo and there's nothing better that you can do. So then they focus on working harder at their job or their business. That's the traditional mindset, right?
Yeah.
I guess what we're saying here is there's this world of alternative investments that yes, you have to do your due diligence and it's going to require a tribe around you to do that. But when it just increases those numbers, and also when you add in the saving money on taxes, right, that at the end of the day hits the bottom line, which is your net worth. And once you inevitably get to that net worth level in the second, third of the wealth elevator, you're playing curator of your own destiny and your lifestyle at that point. But just knowing, like for me, it was in 2015, I had 11 rental properties and I thought I was hot stuff. What kid, I think it was in my late 20s at that point, was becoming an accredited investor. And I realized, whoa, there's like another world of all these other people.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm always around people that are older than me, it seems, but I was gleaning from them that there was another world beyond what I was doing. And this is the world of investing in apartment syndications, things like that. And even now today, I'm constantly growing outside my bounds and realizing that investing in venture capital, buying businesses, private equity is the next frontier that we build upon and we round out the portfolio, right? Personally, I had a lot of real estate, probably a little bit too much for myself. And people need to realize that there's something beyond that they can strive for. But unless you get around other people, and at least like when I look back at like when I was buying properties out of state in 2012, I had a few rental properties in Seattle, but then I started to buy properties in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. If I wouldn't have connected with a bunch of random people, I don't even know who they are nowadays, but like that were buying remote properties, I wouldn't have, number one, realized it was a thing, but second, more importantly, I wouldn't realize that I could do it too, just by talking with these guys. And that's part of the experience of coming to one of these events is you meet these people, you drink a beer with them, and they're just a regular person, may even be a lot dumber than you are. But they're basking in what you want.
Yeah.
And it starts to realize that, hey, I can do this. And everything that is put into this community is making it so I can be successful. There was something that I wanted to mention, Steve. Yeah. I was having a conversation with AI the other day.
I have those same conversations too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was asking it, like, how, I guess Sora 2 came out, right? The video creation tool. And we've been seeing a lot of this like AI schlop. Now, everybody's a creator. Everybody's a Hollywood producer, can produce Marvel quality films, or I can just make a Frozen 2 film for my daughter if I wanted to. It doesn't take too much effort. And there's so much slop, right? They call it AI slop out there. Yeah. I think that there's going to be some type of renaissance or like just people are just like, I'm tired of I don't know what's real. That was the reason why people go through the Reddit feeds, right? Because it's all the cool stuff that happens out there in real life, but now you don't know it's real and people just make stuff up, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what I think is this kind of renaissance, or I don't know, what do you call it when like the world collapses, right? Like you have a reset.
Yeah.
I think people are going to be thirsting more for communities. And that's my big gamble here is people want an investment community. They want a financial community, which I'm creating here, and that you can't take away. AI cannot replace that, the human connection. And I think right now people like to stay in their boxers at their computer. For investing, you cannot do that, especially for higher level investing. But soon for everything, you need to get out of your computer and talk to people and build relationships with people, because that's what makes you happy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you can't just be appeased by all this AI schlop and the social media stuff. And to me, I think that's the future. And that's why I'm making a big gamble on it. And especially in our world, like in the real estate investment world, there's all these like fake gurus out there that haven't done anything. And that was, I think, where it upset me. I'm like, why are these guys have supposedly big communities and they haven't really done too much? When you really start to have gone to their events, there's a bunch of fake it till you make it people and newbies in those types of events. But at the end of the day, I think still people, they flock to these epicenters they want the knowledge, of course, but you can get all that on YouTube, really.
Yep.
But you want the connections with the other peers. And that's, I think, what people really want at the end of the day.
I don't think it is a gamble, because I couldn't agree more with you in terms of this reset that's coming, this renaissance that's coming, because at the end of the day, whether it be community or whether it be value, which it sounds as though you're focusing on both when it comes to what you're offering, those are always going to win over time. That they're always going to outplay, outperform the generational draws that come in the form of an influencer, that come in the form of AI, whatever it might be. At the same time, what I love about where you led there is this idea that the push will come from the possibilities. It's just like to be able to say that if I can get clearer on what's possible, and that can come in the form of a community, that can come in the form of knowledge, whatever it may be. But if I can just simply get clarity on what's possible, will that be the push that I've always been looking for? Will that give me that added oomph when I need it most during those times where I'm maybe not as motivated and not engaged with whatever these possibilities that I thought were possible are? And so I'm just like, my last question, I guess, for you, Lane, is when you think about your own future right now, what is it that's creating possibilities for you that's keeping your push as high as it is? It's one thing I like to ask once in a while of entrepreneurs in your kind of position, because I have no doubt that folks are looking from the outside in at you and saying, brother, you've arrived, you've built what you've built, it's a success, what's keeping you keeping going, and all this kind of thing. So talk to our audience a little bit about.
My vision was always to create like a school for investors who are accredited that need to get to that 8-figure mark. I think I know what they want, but I have not created it into that curriculum or school quite yet. And I think that's the goal in the next decade. I think that the way that people learn, the community building, I think that will change. So that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
But I think I have an idea, vision of what I want to create in the future. And that's why every year, like the events change a little bit. Right.
Sure.
Like based on feedback, or ultimately people want to have a good time too, but also what is it that really, at the end of the day, I want everybody to have a really good 15-20 minute conversation with another person and at least get a chance to build that connection. How can I recreate this times that weekend where it doesn't get boring or forced or anything like that, but it naturally happened?
If you made that your sole mission for the next 10 years, I think you're going to keep yourself pretty busy, because that's an offer, that's an experience that is hard to come by, to create so many unique connections, so many unique conversations. But the fact that you're trying to create it in an environment that sounds as though it's got so much direction, it's so intentional, gives you certainly more of an opportunity to achieve that. But I love the idea of the curriculum, the school, if you will, for folks that want to get to this kind of position too. So again, love hearing that insight around just where you're planning to get to, the work you're currently doing to get there. And before I let you go, Lane, because this has been an absolute blast, and I'm so glad that I've been able to learn from you and provide these insights for our listeners. But if anyone's listening to this conversation thinking, man, I definitely want to learn more about all of this that Lane's talking about, where might we go to learn about that?
Yeah, they can check out my book on Amazon, The Wealth Elevator. And if you guys check out podcasts, my podcast, The Wealth Elevator. If you're an accredited investor, shoot me an email, lane@thewealthelevator.com.
Awesome. So all that information will be in the show notes as well. But again, Lane, this has been great to get a little bit of insights on areas that I myself have maybe trying to educate myself on too, but at the same time, certainly giving us plenty of food for thought around just general growth journey concepts along the way. So brother, I appreciate the time. Just best of luck with everything moving forwards.
Thanks, Steve.
And my thanks again to Lane for joining us on this episode. Let's talk community as we close this one out. We've definitely discussed community on previous episodes, but I want to really just get specific in the idea of the due diligence that comes with knowing what you need to in terms of what you personally need before you go into a community. We live in a world right now where if you want to find a networking event, be it local or at some larger conference, you can find it. If you want to connect with someone, it's never been easier to do it. But what do you need in that connection? What do you need from that conference? What do you need from that community? How aware are you of that part of the equation? Because if you're really not aware, you're then allowing either the connection or the conference or the community to dictate for you what it is you need. Don't get me wrong. We want those kind of challenges. We want to have our curiosity evoked in some way from said community. But if you don't have a single thought, a single reason, a single why, or the way that we talked about it here today, a single push for why you're joining this in the first place, then maybe you're doing something that you don't need to be doing. Maybe you need to be focusing on yourself as opposed to focusing on a community first. Can you find that way? Can you find that direction towards yourself first and foremost before you start focusing externally on all the things potentially around you that could be influencing the direction that you go. So my thanks again to Lane for joining us on this episode.